Just want to see how much review we need to do. So hold on 1 second. All right, so we're up and going. All right, so so I just wanted to like kind of get an idea where we were at, so we can move forward on that. But where we're at now in this whole conversation is really dealing with this issue of separation. Right, we started with this idea of watchfulness. Right, first of all, the key thing that this is kind of a quick review because we had a whole holiday, experience of in essence, like just preparing for Purim and going through that whole process of growth and change, and be being able to feel it now that we're in the day after, especially here in YaSharim. But this idea of being able to acquire attributes that we may not inherently have, right? And when we say acquiring attributes, meaning that like the same way that there's a cell phone and you could download different applications to be able to improve the performance of the cell phone, right? To be able to, serve our needs better, the same way we can do it for ourselves, right? And so that idea is it's a big idea, right? It's a big concept, right? Is the idea that saying that no matter who we are and what we've experienced in life and what we've been through, that we can become the most perfect version of ourselves, right? And to be able to experience, because ultimately what we're talking about here is giving ourselves the tools to express what makes us unique, right? It's a separation from Hashem that does not allow us to express our uniqueness. So the Ramchal, and we read from many others Sfarim, right? How important it is for the same system Ramchal is explaining on a very practical level. The Kabbalists, go in very depth. That's what we also learn Shari Kedusha, right? So the point is just to say, like, going forward, dealing with the attributes, dealing with everything that's going on, is being able to hone in on this idea of transformation, on this idea of perfection, right? So where we're at with Ramchal is that he started us in this process of watchfulness, which is being able to look at our actions, to question our intentions, right? And once we develop this idea, we start to create a separation between negative and positive, right? And then he takes us to the next level, which is being a zealot and having aspect of being I don't know if there's a term zealotness, but this idea of once we understand this system of 613 connections to God, that we understand that 248 of them are things that we go after, and 200 and 200, and 365 are things that we stay away from. So the idea of being a zealot is connected to the frame of 245, right? And that frame of going after and doing the mitzvah and running after the mitzvah and doing what you can to do the mitzvah is what creates this supernatural connection, right? And then he takes us to this next level of cleanliness, right? When this idea of cleanliness is connected to the 365 negative commandments, things that we are prohibited, things that we stay away from, right? And so that idea of having a world of things that we just don't connect to, and those things is clear. And there's a lot of things with cleanliness. There's many levels of cleanliness. There's behavior and this and all these things, right? And being able to cleanse ourselves. But this comes to the idea of watchfulness. And the destruction of the negativity comes to the keeping of the mitzvot, right? And so that's the thing. So now we're on this idea of separation. And this idea of separating ourselves, this idea of not being, to be able to be in that frame of 365 and being able to separate ourselves. So that's where we're at right now, right? And then so we're going to keep going. We're going to keep going in this idea. So if you remember briefly, when we talked about this idea of separation, right? It was this idea of of this concept of being a tzaddik and being a chassid, right? Which is also in the frame of the mitzvahs, right? So we went through this idea. We find separated zealots, watchfulness, the whole thing. But we get to a point when we get to this point where we're able to see, this idea that the Torah, that he comes and says, I don't know why it just brought me back here already. Okay, so we learned about this idea of separation, right? Separating ourselves, the idea of being a chassid, right? A person who's a tzaddik is a person who's doing everything right. The person who's a chassid, that next level, is a person who is separating themselves from things of that with through kavana, right? So a chassid is not around things, as with a tzaddik just does what he has to do, right? But the next level of the tzaddik is being like, yeah, I'm doing all the mitzvahs. Like I know, like for instance, I know people, right, that they do all the mitzvahs. They keep Shabbat, they do this, kosher, this, the whole thing, but no, they still go out certain places and party. You know, they, they're not in the frame of separation. You know what I'm saying? They're in the frame of, hey, I do the mitzvahs and I'm good and I live a righteous life, but they're not at that next level of separation. Okay, so he says, now that we've explained the good type of separation, okay, let's read a little bit Hebrew first. So it says, Une va'ara atada hapari shuta hatov. Vena amar ki hine acharei shehita ba'er lanu heyot kol mi'nayin ha'olam nisha not le adam. She says now that we've explained the good type of separation, after it's been clear to us that all that matters in this world are the trials of men, as we wrote earlier, to demonstrate with proof, and likewise that after we have truly recognized man's great uh, uh, fragility, I guess, frailness, in his close disposition to evil, we will now perform. We will perforce be clear that man should do whatever he can to separate themselves from these matters in order to protect himself from the evil which is at their feet. And there is no worldly pleasure that does not draw after it a sin to his heels. He's saying by example, he says, Derek Mashal Ma'achal Behamish Teder Keshiniku Mikola Maisurei Behachalila. So he says, for example, food and drink, when clean of all dietary prohibitions, are permitted to eat. But filling one's belly draws after the removal of the yoke of the heavens. And drinking of wine draws after a lunacy and other evils. All the more so, a person's habituates himself to sanctify his belly, to satiate, I guess, satiate his belly with food and with drink. But then, if one time he lacks fulfilling his habit, he's greatly in pain and it disturbs him. ומפני נמסר הוא משכיניס דעצמו בתוקף העמל. He says, due to this, he inserts himself in the rush of business, toil, and acquiring possessions in order that his table is set as he wishes. From there, he is further drawn to wrongdoing and theft, and from there to taking false oaths and all other sins which follows. Thus, he goes away from the divine presence and from the Torah study and prayer. So he's using this idea basically of gluttony, right? And gluttony, and lifestyles of gluttony, and which is necessarily against halakha, right? But it's still necessarily, even with that, we want to apply midot. Ma sheheye niftar mikol ze im nipakila told. He says, but if from the beginning he had not allowed himself to be drawn after these pleasures, he would have spared himself from all of this. So he says, and in this way, our sages say regarding the rebellious son, the Torah foresaw this final outcome. He says, "V'kin ala einayina hazinuta ve'amru." Similarly, regarding lunacy, they say that whoever sees the sota in her disgrace should make a nazar vow against wine. So, as you know, sota is a woman, a rebellious woman who disobeys her husband and is with a man is suspected of infidelity. And so he's saying that similarly, lunacy says that whoever sees the sota in her disgrace should make okay. So, in some people, when what I'm getting from this, right? What I'm getting from this is, I just want to see what point they're bringing. So anyway, this is the point they're bringing on this thing. I just want to be clear on this. He says, K debris de Tanaim Rebi Omer. Okay, so the Gemara answers. This was done in accordance with the statement of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi with regards to the sequence of the passages of the Torah as it's taught in a brisa that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says. Why is the portion of a Nazarite placed adjacent to Sota? So they're saying that the whole concept in this particular um, masecta, they said, why is it that when they talk about the idea of a Nazarite, right, a person who restricts against all these different things, right, you know, the Nazir, that whole thing, why is it directly next to Sota? Like, what's going on? What are we supposed to learn from that? He said, this was done to tell you that anyone who sees a Sota in her disgrace, as she undergoes the rite of bitter water, should renounce wine, as wine is one of the causes of sexual transgression, as it loosens inhibitions for the same reasons that the Torah teaches these passages one after the other. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi arranges these tractates. He says, that's a key point. For this reason, the Torah teaches that these passages, one after the other, Rabbi Yunus arranged these tractates one after the other. Okay, so anyway, so the point is like saying like this idea of abstaining from things. Like I know a girl right now who is in rehab, right? And I don't know the whole story, but I met her. She, was here from America, and she's going through it, right? And so I asked her what she was doing for Purim, just to see, whatever. First, she was doing a lot of drugs when she was here, and I met her briefly at a Shabbat at her house, and from there, we stayed out of contact, and then months ago we somehow reconnected. I don't know how it happened. I think it was Instagram. Anyways, long story short, she's doing a lot of drugs, a lot of cocaine, right? That's her thing. That's what she's dealing with, right? And she's telling me about it, and I'm just talking to her, same thing. And then I got busy, and I didn't talk to her for a couple of weeks or something like this. Anyway, so I talked to her again, and she's in rehab, right? And so I said to her, so what are you doing in Purim? Because Purim's the time where people are drinking, partying, something. So she said there's a sober Purim that she's going to, that they won't have any alcohol, drinks, this type of thing, and people will just be having a good time, right? So by going, she could have went to a normal Purim and say, hey, you know what, I'm not going to drink. I'm just going to go and enjoy myself, right? I'm good. But she went to a sober Purim, which meaning the whole point was reinforcing this idea of separation, right? And so he's saying that the idea by the Nazarite doesn't even deal with anything that could lead to wine. Like they don't even mess with raisins, right? And so he's saying that this aspect of separation is being aware of what we're strong at and what we're not strong at. You know what I'm saying? And so anyway, so he says like this: "V'tir ki zot hi tachalu." Sorry, I'm sorry. Takbula gadola le Adam le ma'am mehi netzel mitz ro. So he says observe that this is the great strategy for a man to save himself from the evil inclination. Because a man is engaged in sin, it is very difficult for him to defeat and subdue it. Therefore, it is necessary that while a man is still far from the sin, he keeps his distance. For then it will be difficult for the sin inclination to draw him into the place of sin. והנה הבעלילה לאמא אשתו מותרת. So he's saying the material relations are completely permitted, but the sages decree immersion in a mikvah for those who had seminal emission in order that the Torah scholar not be frequently with their wives like roosters. So he says, okay, so he says material relations are completely permitted, but sages decree immersion in a mikveh for those who had wasting seed at night, in order that Torah scholar will not be frequently with their wives like a rooster. For even through the conjugal acts itself is permitted, nevertheless, he imprints his lust within his nature, and from there he can be drawn into forbidden as the sages state. There is a small organ in man. If one satiates it, it becomes hungry. If he starves it, it becomes obedient in ways, right? So he's saying like this. He's saying even the concept of having sex, right? Sex is something that we do. It's a spiritual experience, right? Of two souls becoming connected, the Shekhinah becoming connected. It's a whole package, right? But he's saying like something interesting. He's saying this thing of like, even with things that we're allowed, like, because he's talking about things like drinking and sex and different things. And he's saying that a person should have kavana around these things. Like, it's just not, just having sex because, oh, I'm bored. You know what I mean? Like, it's not something you just do to pass time. It's nothing, something you're doing just to escape, right? Because if you're using it for that perspective, it's going to lead you in other areas. Velo od ele she'afilu basha'a har uya har or you. All right. Not only that, he says, not only that, but because at the fitting hour and proper time, they say the Rabbi Eliezer, he uncovers a hair's breadth and conceals two, and act as though he were compelled by a demon, in order to not deprive pleasure then. So he's just going through things. He says, Al mebushima veha ki shutim lo hizera mahatorah al. So he says, regarding clothing and ornaments, the Torah does not issue a warning regarding their style, beauty, or style, but rather only that it not contain a mixture of wool and linen, and that they should be fitted with tzitzit. Otherwise, all is permitted. Amna mi'im lo yada. She says, but who does not know that fancy clothing and adornments would draw a person to arrogance? See, he's dealing with what's permitted. This isn't for the rookies. This is for the big boys, right? This is for the people who are in Torah, who are living this Torah and saying, no, even that's not enough. We have to, if we're trying to obtain these godly qualities. If it's just about being a simple Jew, okay, fine, you're good. Just do the mitzvahs and you'll be rewarded. But if you want to go to that next level, if you want to reveal your uniqueness, these are the things. He says, so these things, he says, but who does not know that? Okay, will bring a person to arrogance, and also lunacy will mix its way inside of giving the rise of jealousy, lust, and oppressing others, which are generated by whatever man deems precious to obtain. Our sages already said, as soon as the evil inclination sees a man swinging his heels when walking smoothing his garments and curling his hair, he says, the negative inclination says he's mine. So he's saying like this whole thing, like, what we call bling, right? What we call swag, these type of things, these things, okay, it's okay to do it. But the point is saying, but you have to be aware that it could lead to haughtiness. It could lead to gaiva. Why? Because we live in a society that says if you wear these clothes and you present yourself in this way, that you're holy, right? That you, not just holy, I wouldn't say holy, no one cares about holy, that you are a person of respect and honor. You are a dignitary, you are a king, right? And so he says, Hatilu Hadibur Ima Eino Davere Asur. He said, strolling in conversations which are not something prohibited are certainly permitted by the Torah. So now he's dealing with conversations, right? But much neglect of Torah study, bittul, is drawn after this, and how much slander and how many lies, how much frivolity the scripture says. In the multitude of words, sin is not lacking, but he who holds back his lips is wise. Kalal hadever kevan shekola inayin olam einam. He said, but the general principle, since all matters of this world are nothing but grave dangers, how could he not want to escape from them and strive to distance himself from them, not deeming praiseworthy? Zehu inayin ha parishut hatov. He said, this is a good type of separation, namely one who takes away from the world and all uses he makes of it, and only that which he forces due to the needs of nature. Huma shehishta vecha Rebbe Be Maas Be Rebbe. He says, Rebbe Be Amar. Okay, so he says, and this is what Rebbe Yehuda praised himself in a statement. I quote it, that he did not deprive himself from the pleasures of this world, not even one little finger, although he was a prince of Israel, and his table was necessarily the table of kings, due to their diligency of his portion, as our sages of blessed memory taught, two nations are in your womb. Says this, you remember that. So he says, this refers to Rabbi Antinonius. He says, who from whose table neither lettuce nor radish nor cucumber was ever absent, either in the summer or the winter. This is the likewise for the king Chesiahu, the king of Yehuda. He says, Ushemar. So this is the thing. This isn't like, oh, don't experience anything nice. You know what I'm saying? So we're getting somewhere. Especially women. Women like clothes, they like luxury. This is the issue for men, right? But even a righteous woman is going to adapt many of these things as well, too. But women, some women, because they're so in the malchus and that aspects of the klipa, that they need to do things to feel beautiful, right? As when men are coming from Zer and Pin, we're coming from that heavenly light. We're inspired. But women are in the malchus. So because of the energy influence of malchus, there's this sense of feeling surrounded by physicality and not necessarily feeling beautiful at times, right? So women need it, right? Women need it. So this is really specifically for guys, but righteous women who've elevated past that level also understand that they don't need it either, right? So he says the other teachings I've quoted all support and teach that is incumbent on men to separate from all for the sake of worldliness, pleasures, and not to fall into its dangers. Ve'im tish'ala ve'to'amer im kina ma'efo shazeh. So he says, and if you ask, if this is so necessary and essential, why did the sages not decree likeness in their decrees on various fences and enactments? So he's saying, like, if you're saying that this is so important and we should do these things, why is Ramchal writing about this? Right? Why is Ramchal writing this? The sages should have already said, don't excessively drink alcohol. Don't have these conversations. Don't focus on wearing, looking to judge yourself or your creature importance based off of the clothes you wear. He says, the answer is clear and simple. For our sages do not impose enactments upon the people unless the majority of the public will be able to abide by it. He said the majority of the people of the public are not capable of being pious. So it's sufficient for them it is sufficient for them that they be sadics, righteous people. right? So he's saying like this level of chassid, right? This level of separation, this level of being completely with the Creator and working yourself and cleansing yourself and elevating higher and higher in consciousness is something that most people can't do. And when the sages give rules, they don't put a burden, they don't put a stumbling block in front of Am Israel, right? But rather what they do is that they create these fences that allow the collective community to live up to a standard. Ag mahashri din asher ba'ama hachafesi lezikot likaraba toda yitivarek. So he says upon the remit of few among the nation who desire to obtain closeness to him. So don't go around the Jewish world and looking for a whole group of pity that are people, a group of people looking for what we're reading right now. Okay, it's not going to happen. And truthfully, that's why it's very hard for a lot of people who come into Judaism, a lot of people who call themselves converts, these types of things. It's very hard for them because they come in on such a deep Torah emisodic level. Like it's just all about truth and this and God and leaving the past and breaking away. And they're really living in leaving Egypt. They're really living in these ways, right? And so it's a very difficult thing because a lot of the Jewish people in the community are not holding like this. It's a tradition for them. It's a custom. It's a belief in God. It's their religion. It's their heritage. And that's where it stops, right? And he says there is a remit few among the nation of Israel who desire the attainment of closeness to the Creator, blessed be He, and to benefit through their attainment. The rest of the masses who depend on them, and on them it is incumbent to fulfill the Mishnah, the code of the pious, which others are not capable of fulfilling. So he's saying that if you have a desire for this, you're the one bringing in the light. Your separations, your this, are creating more light in the world. And this is the Jewish people are depending on you. Hem sedire ha parishud eleki bazeh. So he says their duties are of the aforementioned order of separation. And this God has chosen for it's impossible for the nation that each individual be equal in the level. He said their duty is he said the duties are, as mentioned, orders of separation. In this, God has chosen for it is impossible for the nation for the nation that each individual is equal in levels because there are various ranks, every man according to his level and understanding. So everybody can't be Chief Rabbi Pinchas, right? Not everybody could be that person who wakes up every morning, who wakes up and is doing Tikkun Rachel, Tikkun Leah, who's wrapping the sackcloth, putting ashes on his forehead, crying for the base of Mikdash, learning, different aspects of the Zohar, and doing that every day. There's not a lot of people, and there's even less people who even think about such a thing, right? And so he says, and behold, he says, "Vehine li fakot yichadei segulam umasi asher." He said, "Behold, at least there should be a few treasures individuals who prepare themselves completely, and through these few and non-prepared will also merit to receive His love and the dwelling of His Shekhinah." Ube Kanaim Shadari Shud Chazal. All right. So he says like this: our sages of blessed memory expounded on the four species of the lulav. Let's see and come to atone on those. Uve kaver matzanu le Eliyahu Lazikun. So he says, and we find regarding Eliyahu answered Rabbi Yehuda ben Levi in the story of Ola, the son of Kosev, when the latter said, when the latter said, "It is not a Mishnah," and Eliyahu rebuked him, but it is a Mishnah for the pious. Well, we have to go into that story to really bring what Ramchal is bringing out, but we get an idea that what he's saying, that Eliyahu is saying, there's different levels. Ag ha parishud hara. Who kaderek chasi, sorry, haskalim. So he says, but the bad sort of separation is that of the foolish Gentile who abstains not only from taking of the world and the essentials, but also from taking from which is essential. They smite their bodies with suffering and strange afflictions, with God does not desire at all. On the contrary, the sages say it is forbidden for a man to afflict himself. It says in Tani, regarding the charity that said, whomever needs to take but does not is one who sheds blood. He says, and likewise they interpret a living soul, the soul that I gave you kept you alive. And whoever sits in fast is called a sinner. He says, which is qualified of being in the case of where a person is unable to withstand it. So he's saying there's levels of separation, but you see with the Christians, they do a lot of this denial stuff, and and going through these like painful rituals, and you even see some sects in Islam, that beat themselves and all these different types of things. They say I'm being dedicated to God. No, that's not what God wants. Like it's never was talked about. Vehilal. Hilal the Great, Hayah Omer. Hilal would apply the verse. The pious man does good to his own soul. To eat, to eating the morning meal, he should also wash his face, hands, in honor of the Maker, referring from the practices of washing in the statues of a king. So, okay, so it says ha'arela, because he says he says then there is a true principle. Whatever worldly matters is not essential for a man, it is proper for him to separate from it. And whatever is essential for him, for whatever reason, if he is separate from it, he is a sinner, since the things is necessary for him. Vehine ze kalala na'am. She says, and behold, this is a faithful guideline, but weighing of this rule is a matter of individual judgment and according to his understanding, a man of praise. So this is where we're going to end off. So he says, for it is impossible to discuss all the details of separation, for there are so many numerous that a man cannot grasp all of them. Rather, each matter must be dealt with in its time. Okay, so we're going to stop here, and we're going to pick up either later today if you want. I'm pretty sure I'll be relaxing. If you want to learn again later today, I mean tonight for me, when I say relaxing, because it's nighttime, because we're busy, we're running, we're doing things, we're conquering. But so tonight I should be there, and maybe some other people may join as well. But either way, we'll do something tonight. But tomorrow we'll continue on, just because we need to really push to this Ram call. I think we're close to being halfway through. We're in chapter 14 now, so we're close to halfway through, and so more than halfway through, and so I want to finish it so we can start other Svarim. But this is really powerful. Any thoughts, reflections on this?
Yeah, definitely, powerful chapter. It was saying that I was going to like gluttony and how, I took from it how it opens up these other pathways of darkness in a sense, because from being gluttonous, now we're going to, if you encounter a sota, like why did you see this? Why were you the one to see this transgression happen? That means you're connected to that. You have that inside you as well in some form or fashion. So, it was just showing how your actions open up these different, negative, environments for yourself in a sense. More resistance for yourself to push through. Is it necessarily bad? Yeah, I mean, what can we say is bad? Because everything that comes from YaSharim is for the best. So these are just consequences, and they're more challenging paths that you must go down. And it might not. I think with our actions, a lot of times the way we get the consequence that comes behind it. Are you ready for that at that time? It's almost like,
Mm.
okay, if you're running, if you're a runner or something like that, and it's like, okay, you got a regimen for the next 3 weeks. And if you do this every single day, you're gonna be where you need to be. But you're like, I'm ready now. Let's skip 2 weeks off. Let me get that regimen right now. You're not going to make it. Could you potentially? Absolutely, but you don't have the necessary skills. You don't have the endurance that was going to happen if you would took your time the right way. So I feel like a lot of things that we do, we accelerate a situation, and then we find ourselves in it. It's like, oh, what am I going to do? It's like now you have to cry even more, which it's like nothing we do can separate from our show. We find ourselves in more difficult situations, but that's just based on what we've done. So, just taking from this, uh just being mindful, and the purpose of separation. When you separate yourself, you put those fences up, you remove the potential to transgress, but at the same time, you have to be mindful of what's permissible. And the example that was used with marriage is perfect because, okay, now you can have sex with your wife, that's fine. But if you overindulge in it, now you're just projecting your lust into a holy place. And it's kind of the same thing. Is it permissible to you? Yes, but too much of anything can be a bad thing. So, it's just given the levels of how you should conduct yourself and how you should, your mindset and where you should be at. So, yeah, it's something I'm definitely going to review. And this entire cipher is just, it's like, it's a step-by-step guide, just how to really, you know, clear out those error dimensions and put up the appropriate, bulwarks to keep you moving in the right path for Hashem. So yeah, definitely later today for me and tonight we can jump back on. I would love to do that.
Yeah, we should be able to. I'm not. I'm like, bro. I'm like burnt out, bro. Like, I gotta like be inside the house and cocoon for a minute because it was just so wild. But yeah, but we're pushing, bro. We're pushing, and this is a rom call, bro. This is a master. Like both of us, we're just, we're students of the Ram Call. Like, what an amazing thing. So, you're right. This is step by step guide. This is a classic, in Israelite literature, Jewish literature, and we just need to just it's changing us, and this is one of those safers you can't read it enough times. Like, we're learning it now. God willing, you will teach this hundreds of times to people throughout the course of your life, and people from all backgrounds, all walks of life, and everything. And you'll master this safer, and this will be one of your safers. You'll have a few safers that you'll master, and you have those safers, and then when you go out and you teach, it won't even be teaching. You'll be just having a conversation. You know what I mean? Because those safers are you. You know what I mean? They're not books. These are me. This is like I am watchfulness. I am zealot. I am clean. I am clean. I am a tzaddik, and I made it to a chassid, and I understand separation and these types of things, right? So this is not out of us. It's not academia. It's who we are. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to master Safari and put ourselves in a position to be teachers. And once we master the language of one safer, all the other ones are easy. You know what I mean? Because you got the language, right? And you already have the Kabbalistic like blueprint. You know what I mean? Like you have that part. You learned it by Rob Zion, other people. So you have that. So now what we're doing now is building those building blocks, right? Because you already understand the esoteric and Bina and Ketchet. So now we got to bring it to the ground, right? We got to bring it to the ground. We got to bring it practical. We got to build that house. You know what I'm saying? And so that is what we're doing there. And that's the thing. When you meet your students, some students will not be in the Kabbalah. You may have to start with the Kabbalah because they're not in that place, right? And so if you're not in that place of the 10 dimensions, it's gonna be very hard for you to not make Judaism religious, right? Just another religion. And you have these rules and they have those rules and we have these rules. Anyways, we'll continue on, and we'll continue on. But let's show. Baruch atah Adonai leolam.